went down and he's gone. And then especially with Brown, I mean, you got to do something with a guy that's going to be like that. I think you and I both agreed about that weeks ago and even months ago, that it's just a mess. When you have a leader, a quote unquote leader on your team behaving in that way, you just can't keep him around. It becomes too problematic in the locker room. So from Pittsburgh's side of things, I can't blame them one bit for taking whatever the best compensation that they could get for him. I see where they're going with that. It's just the Raiders that I can't stand with what they did and then giving the guy a raise. I mean, I love your analogy. Yeah, so he behaves badly and you just give him more.
Yeah, and I mean, and the Raiders are a team, that's another team where I don't know what the hell they're doing either, because they're all over the map. They look like they're trying to shed money. They get rid of Cooper. They send Khalil Mack packing. John Gruden whines and complains all year he doesn't have a pass rusher. Well, you just sent one of the best ones in the league out of town. So good luck in the draft trying to just hit on another guy that's going to be the next Khalil Mack. Then they go out and they get Antonio Brown, who's older than Cooper. And Antonio Brown in Las Vegas next year? Have they seen this guy's social media? I don't know that that's going to work that well, Eric.
No. I hope John Gruden hires a good babysitting program when they get down there.
Yeah, maybe Dallas can lend the Des Bryant security team to the Raiders, and they can just follow him around in Vegas. I mean, nobody gets in trouble when they go to Vegas, right? Much less if you live there and you've got, $50-some million burning a hole in your pocket. You can't get in trouble in Vegas, right?
No, I think it should be perfectly fine for Antonio Brown. I can't see him getting into any trouble down there.
Yeah, the whole Raiders mess just... I mean, I'm an AFC West fan with Denver, so watching the Raiders have no direction is great, but they don't seem like they know one week to the other what they're trying to do. Are they trying to shed and gain picks and get younger? Are they just trying to get star power in? I don't feel like there's a lot of direction on that team either going forward. I feel like that is a confusing team. They don't feel like Gruden likes Derek Carr at all. Like he feels like he's always one move away, or the next breaking news segment that's going to pile on Twitter that Derek Carr's been shipped out of town somewhere. It just feels like there is no continuity on that football team between what Gruden is doing from week in, week out.
Oh, for sure. I've been high on Derek Carr for years, but it seems like he's had regression with whatever's going on in Oakland. And I think some of it's leadership. And now last year, I think some of it's coaching and some of it's, are we tanking? Are we not tanking? What's our strategy overall? It's hard to be a leader and try to run the team from the backfield, not knowing, are you supposed to excel? Or are you not supposed to excel? I just don't like where they're going with that. But then now you've got this rebuild going on and they've brought in some pieces and you've got Antonio Brown, and you would hope that that pays off in the short term. So it's very confusing, the Raiders. I think they're always that way. I think they actually enjoy being that way to some extent. Maybe we should move on to some of the other exciting free agent signings around the NFL, because there were some other big news topics, and it wasn't just Odell Beckham Jr. being traded and Antonio Brown being picked up by the Raiders. Justin, I'm sure there's going to be some names you want to throw at me, but there's also some guys sitting out there, i.e. a Teddy Bridgewater, now a Blake Bortles, of course, Ryan Tannehill, and others that I'm not sure this quarterback carousel is really done rotating yet.
Well, you know what? Colin Kaepernick's better than all those guys.
Oh, my gosh.
Oh, wait a minute. Did I say that out loud?
I think you're on the wrong podcast.
Is this CNN? The guy that we haven't talked about yet, the guy that your Jets just gave $35 million guaranteed to, Le'Veon Bell, he's back in green. What do you think about your Jets making the move there for Le'Veon?
Well, I don't like Le'Veon Bell, so I hope he does well. Obviously, if he rushes for 100 yards a game and helps them win football games, I'm going to be happy about that. But I don't like Le'Veon Bell, and I also think it's hilarious and somewhat ironic that he decided to forego $14.5 million on a franchise tag, be a big baby, and pout about how unfair it is. And then he signs a $52 million contract that breaks down to $13 million a year, which is less than the franchise tag he gave up at $14.5 million. And the overall deal is less than what Pittsburgh offered him a year ago. So I'm glad at least that his whole pouting and I'm a better player than this didn't really pay off the way it did for Antonio Brown, because again, I just think that's a bad precedent.
In my opinion, Eric, what he did was he basically bet on himself that he was going to get hurt. That's what he bet on last year. He bet the fact that I'm going to go out here and get hurt, and then I'm going to affect my next deal, versus being a guy that said, okay, I'll take the $14.5 million. I'm going to have a great season. And I bet somebody's still going to give me $30 million guaranteed. I think even if he had played last year and he remained relatively healthy and he came out of the season, even if he had 300 plus carries and 75 plus receptions, I still think the Jets would have still had money. The Ravens would have still had money. The Colts would have still had money. teams would have still had money to offer him 28 to 32 million guaranteed, I have a feeling. So he basically bet against himself. You hear guys all the time that bet on themselves. I feel like he betted against himself that he couldn't stay healthy, and thus he would destroy his own market, where I think if he would have went in and played and taken the money, and even if he would have had some kind of arrangement with the Steelers, look, can you guys at least platoon me with Connor some, so I'm not getting the same amount of basically NBA talks about usage, so sort of NFL same way, just so much usage where I'm getting 90+% of the carries and you're using me in the pass game so much. Can you at least use Connor more so you're not basically killing me? I think Pittsburgh would have probably been okay with that. But instead, he just decides he doesn't want to play, gives up $14.5 million. Sort of, he gets $35 million guaranteed. But for a guy that seems like he's so in tune with money, Eric, I feel like he could have been closer to $50 million guaranteed if he would have just come in and played last year.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I mean, I knew that there was a risk with him betting on himself, as you say, not taking the $14.5 million. Certainly injury could have happened, but he could have gotten injured any time in the last 12 months, just around his house, in the yard, playing pickup basketball, whatever. Although if he's truly rumored to be gaining some weight, I don't think he's actually been physically active over the past year other than running his mouth. The problem I have with a guy like Le'Veon Bell is a year ago, he was bashing the Jets like $60 million wasn't even enough to come play for such a horrible franchise. Oh, all of a sudden a year later, when it's your only option, or it's at least your best option, all of a sudden it's good enough. That's why I say I hope he does well because I'm a Jets fan, but you won't see me wearing a Le'Veon Bell jersey.
Well, let's talk about some of the other moves that went down. Your Jets were pretty busy. It looked like they were going to get C.J. Mosley and Barr from the Vikings, but Barr had to change of heart. He goes back to Minnesota. But you guys gave C.J. Mosley a ton of money, 5 years, $85 million, over $50 million guaranteed in that deal. Did you think that they overpaid for Mosley when you saw that deal?
I think some of these players, not just Mosley, but there's a lot of players actually that I've...
Landon Collins?
Yeah, exactly. Collins and others. I just feel like if you're looking at even a guy like Nick Foles, love the guy. I thought he got overpaid. But, Honey Badger, I thought he got overpaid. I thought Mosley got overpaid. Collins definitely overpaid. There's going to be other names here in a little bit. We talk about Tyrell Williams got overpaid.
Here's a question for you. Who was Jacksonville betting against when they ran that money up for Foles? Was there like 4 or 5 other teams that we never heard of that Jacksonville, or were they just like doing the Ralph Breaks the Internet where they just bet against each other and run the price on eBay up to like, $20,000 or something? Like Coughlin and Khan were in a room like just betting back and forth of let's just raise the stakes higher for Foles when there was like no one else that was even rumored to be after him.
That's a lot of money for a guy who had basically one playoff run that succeeded. And again, I'm not downplaying him. I appreciate everything he did for the Eagles, but he's been a starter in this league before. So it makes me nervous for his legacy because a year from now, 2 years from now, Jacksonville could be going, oh man, why did we give him all that money?
Yeah, I just didn't look. He probably is deserving of it. But when you looked at the other teams that were looking for quarterbacks, it didn't feel like, when you look at what the Giants did, they certainly weren't in a position to take him. And you start running down the list. Denver trades Keenum to Washington, which was another team they thought, but they really don't have that much cap room. And then they go out and spend a bunch of money on Landon Collins. So it just didn't feel like there was any other teams that were really bidding for full service. And it just felt like Jacksonville was like, okay, this is the going rate. We're just going to give you $50 million. And Foles was like, thanks, I'll take that. That's an easy deal to get done. I mean, this was rumored that Jacksonville was going to be in it on Foles. When we did the show last week, we did a little bit on talking about Foles going to Jacksonville because it came out of the combine of it. I just felt like,
and I feel like it was honestly, Justin, I feel like it was rumored back when he was still playing with the Eagles. Like, yeah, people were just speculating, right?
I mean, it just
exactly.
Like this was
speculating. Well, Jacksonville's going to need a quarterback because Blake Bortles is just not working out down there. And it feels like it was for 4 months that people thought he was going to go down there. So yeah, what other team wanted him for $50 million?
I guess when his agent, Foles' agent, looked at the fact that they were paying Bortles $16.5 million or more than that this year, they were like, you know what, whatever you give us, better start with at least a 2, and you better have at least $50 million guaranteed, or we're not coming there. And they kind of panned themselves in a corner, I guess, at this point. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of money being spent. And it wasn't like there was a ton of like big name guys out there. It was just these names, it feels like, and there's just so much money with the cap and so many teams have money it just feels like a lot of guys got overpaid in some huge deals.
So are you surprised at all that Baltimore reaches for a guy like Ingram when Lamar Jackson, one of his biggest skill sets is that he could rush for 80 to 100 yards a game?
No, I think when they had the whole Alex Collins situation happen and they got rid of him, they had a need at running back. And I think Ingram sort of fits what they want to do with Lamar Jackson. I think they want to have multiple running backs. They want to have guys that can pass catch, guys that can sort of slam it in there. You saw Gus Edwards emerge last year for this team. The move that confused me more with Baltimore was the fact that they let Suggs go, they let Mosley go, and then they turn around and give Earl Thomas $32 million guaranteed on a 4-year deal after it felt like 2 or 3 years ago, Earl Thomas was talking about retiring and coming off of a broken leg last year, and kind of a guy that was a bit of a troublemaker in Seattle, not showing up for practice and getting fined and flipping the bird to
his own team,
flipping the middle finger to his own team. And then they turn around and they let a guy like Mosley walk, who's a key piece to their defense, and they already have a very good secondary. And then you give $32 million guaranteed to Earl Thomas. That's what puzzled me, Eric. I didn't understand that move at all.
Yeah. So back to the question that started this whole thing is, I mean, just as far as the Jets go, I'm glad though that they're spending money. Is Mosley overpaid? Yeah, maybe. But at least the Jets are being aggressive right now, going after Le'Veon Bell, going after Mosley, trying to get Sam Darnold some help, both on the offensive side and the defensive side. I think that's good. I think that's good for a Jets team who realizes that hopefully Tom Brady and the Patriots have maybe another year or two of their run, and then you've got to be more competitive in that AFC East. You just have to, because other teams like the Dolphins and the Bills, they're not going to wait around. They're not just going to sit there and be happy with last place for 3 decades instead of 2 decades. So if you're the Jets, take this opportunity, keep that momentum you've got going. You've got a new head coach. You've got a new quarterback now going into another year where you feel like you need to make a move toward a better next 5 or 6 years out of that AFC East, because Tom Brady's reign is not going to last forever.
No, and this is your window as a Jets fan. Like, this is what you want. You want to get a rookie quarterback in the first round because you have basically 5 years where you're not paying him top dollar, and you get a lot of cap flexibility. So this is the time to overspend on some of your skill positions and build a really good roster around Darnold, because for this year and the 3 years afterwards, he's not costing you 25 to 30 to 33, 34, wherever the next quarterback contract's going to go, and eat up 15 to 20% of your cap. So this is the time where the Jets need to be aggressive in their spending. They can take some chances. They can try to build a defense, because as good as Brady is, at some point, Eric, and we're starting to see it a little bit with LeBron, at some point, the age is going to catch up to these guys. The skill set is going to start to deteriorate. So you have to be ready, if you're the Jets, to take that mantle, because Miami's not doing anything. I mean, they're talking about Bridgewater. They're shipping Tannehill out of town. Coaching changes there. They're getting rid of guys off that team. They seem to be in flux. No one really seems like they want to go to Buffalo, and Josh Allen did more with his legs last year than his arms, so they don't seem like they're a threat either. So if in 2 years, that AFC East could be wide open, and if you're the Jets, you might have a window where you could make a run for a few years before you have to pay Darnold if he pans out like they think.
Yeah, I agree. And I got to ask you this, because I know it's not on the show notes, but even Wednesday night here, as we sit here and do this show, there's just more stuff coming up through the news wire, and we look at the the sources that are reporting things, and you see a guy like Coleman going over to the 49ers. Now they've got 3 running backs, assuming that McKinnon comes back healthy from his injury. Then you've got Coleman and Breda. And then assuming that Garoppolo comes back strong from his injury, you can start talking about the 49ers solidifying their offense again. But Justin, that leads me to a question. Out of all the moves that you've seen, and hopefully we're kind of slowing down here a little bit now, what team got better in the last, let's say, 5 to 6 days, whether it be through trade or free agency? What team significantly got better? And I know the Browns maybe is the easy answer, but is there anything else out there that's either caught your eye or made you think, okay, that's a good thing for that team to pick up a couple of those pieces that they did?
Yeah, I mean, the first team, as you were saying, that was the Browns, but I think that's too easy. The team that I think we kind of beat up on a little bit with the Raiders not having direction, I think some of the stuff they've did, because the fact that last year, once they traded Cooper, they had nothing around Derek Carr. And now all of a sudden he looks out and he goes, wait a minute, I'm not just throwing to Jordy Nelson, who the Packers cast off because basically he was too old and coming off an injury. I now have Antonio Brown, I have Tyrell Williams, and I have Jordy as basically the third option. They spent money and got Trent Brown. That was what I was talking about with the direction of this team. It looked like they were trying to shed money, and then all of a sudden they've kind of been on a spending spree. The other team that kind of under the